standing at the top of the stairs trying to give her as much space and talk to her, and she wasn't having much of the conversation. And then she started screaming again and being very verbally abusive and physically abusive, pushed me out of the way, and then started swinging at me in the garage, threatening me that if I didn't move my car so that she could leave, that she'd call the cops. And she hit me and hit me and hit me, and ultimately my thumb here, I had to have this casted because I was trying to protect myself. And I moved my car out of the way, and she left. And I was perplexed, didn't really know what to do. I kind of, sat down in the house and scratched my head and didn't know what resources, who to call, what to do. And the next thing I knew, the police showed up and charged me with domestic violence with assault against her. And I was taken to jail. And no contact order for 365 days. So I couldn't contact her directly.
From just the allegation, this hasn't gone to court, or, there's been no... So just from the allegation, no, you're not allowed to contact for 365 days, just like that.
Yeah. Certain terms that all she wanted was the party. She just wanted the wedding. She just wanted the party with her friends, and that should have been a massive red flag for me, that if she was willing to do that to him, that she would likely be willing to do that to me. But I came in as the guy who would fix things, the guy that would fix her, fix the relationship, give her a better life, I suppose. So we were together for 5 or 6 years, and then we decided that we were, she moved into my house originally, and she was in quite a lot of debt, and I owned a house and was not in debt. I was in a good financial position, and I said to her, I'll make you a deal. If you take care of, buying the food, I'll take care of everything else. So like, you don't have to pay any rent because you're living with me and, I love you. You don't have to pay heat or hydro or gas or insurance or anything. You just buy the food and I'll take care of everything else. And the first time she went out and got groceries, she asked me for half of the money for the groceries. And that should have been the second red flag. But I was proud. And I thought, whatever, like I've got money and I'm not really worried about it. But that should have been a very clear red flag for me. So we moved forward, decided that we didn't decide that we wanted to have kids, but we decided that we weren't going to try and avoid having kids anymore, if I can kind of put it that way. We were ready, and both of us wanted to have children. When we got pregnant, she'd been diagnosed before I met her with a pituitary adenoma, a small tumor at the pituitary gland, which led to kind of rapid weight gain and then weight loss, led to some emotional issues, and I guess soothing habits. She bit her nails a lot and that kind of stuff. And when we got pregnant, she had to go off the medication for her pituitary adenoma because it wasn't safe for the pregnancy. And then, so that was fine. We went through the pregnancy, everything seemed fine. And as we were coming up to kind of the due date, she we were going to parenting classes together at the hospital, and I showed up for a parenting class in the place that it normally was, but and hadn't received an email that had moved to another room in the hospital. So when I showed up in the wrong room, I found that there was actually a class in that room for fathers dealing with first-time fathers and how to best deal with postpartum depression. And I thought, this is kind of like a happy miracle that I found this workshop, and it ran for the same amount of time. So I went to our parenting class, and I said to my ex, I've just kind of stumbled upon this thing, and if it's with you, I'll go and do this thing and learn about how I can best support you during postpartum. And you can do the regular parenting class, and then we'll obviously meet afterwards and drive home together, and we'll discuss and chat. And a lot of the feedback I got from that workshop, the thing that certainly resonated with me the most was it's difficult to quantify what's happening when someone's going through postpartum, and the best thing you can do to be supportive for your partner is to just become a yes man for a little while and just do whatever it is she's asking to do. Some of it may seem completely illogical or irrational, but just like suck it up and do it. And that's the advice that I took. And I think the danger in that, in becoming that yes man, is that she lost the positive masculine role model that would say, no, that's not what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. She lost that. She lost respect for me because I became this person who would, she'd say jump and I'd say how high. So when we gave birth, she wasn't able to deliver naturally, so she had to have an emergency C-section. And when Aubrey was born, she didn't want anything to do with him. She didn't want to touch him, didn't want to hold him, didn't want anything. And I was obviously, maybe not obviously, but I was certainly of the mind that, the baby goes onto the mom's tummy and she gets to hold the baby first. And she just said, no, I don't want anything to do with them. And the doctor said, like, skin on skin contact is really important for a newborn. Do you want to hold the baby? And I was like, ripped off my robe and like, of course, yes. And like, I just sat with Aubrey for several hours on my chest. As soon as she was, ready, and she was recovering and didn't want to breastfeed. She was concerned that breastfeeding would affect her breasts later on in life, and that they wouldn't look the way they normally did. So she was producing milk and she was pumping milk, and decided to just stop and switch to formula. And that became a bit of a trigger point for me, because all the research I'd done was that, mother's milk is like the most nutritious and amazing thing for a newborn. And if you are producing milk, I know some people don't produce milk, but she was just elected not to, in my opinion, feed the baby like this, nectar of the gods that would do the best for his growth and his nutrition. So we switched to formula, and I just, like, for the next 9 months, I just became that yes man. And then at one point, I came home from work and they were gone, and she was non-responsive. I was texting her and calling her and trying to figure out where she and Aubrey were, and no response. And then she finally responded several hours later, and said she'd be back the next day, and I was worried. And then she said everything was fine. She just needed to, get some space and get some air. And then that happened again. She left to an undisclosed location, and I came home from work and no response. She was supposed to be home with the baby and wasn't there. And at that point, I could have kind of called an Amber Alert, I suppose, or something, but I didn't, and just kind of kept on trying to work things out with her, because that's what I felt I needed to do as a father, was to, if she was going through postpartum, that I needed to help her through that. And then the third time it happened, she called and said, I'm leaving the house again, and I'm taking Aubrey with me. And I said, okay, I'm coming home. I want to talk to you about this before. So I left work in the middle of the day and came home. And we had a tandem garage, where, I don't know if you know what that is, but like where one car parks in a townhouse and then the next car comes in and parks in behind it. Like, it's not side by side parking, one behind the other. So her car was parked in, and I, as I always did, my car, I was, first out and last in, so I always took that back spot. So I parked my car in behind hers and went inside, and she was a little bit frantic, and I tried to calm her down. She started screaming at me, and she started hitting me. And I was trying to give her as much space as possible. I stood at the top of the stairs. I guess in our master bedroom was on the top floor. There was a staircase that came up into it, and she was wandering around the master bedroom packing bags, and I was at the top of the stairs trying to give her as much space and talk to her, and she wasn't having much of the conversation. And then she started screaming again, and being very verbally abusive and physically abusive, pushed me out of the way, and then started swinging at me in the garage, threatening me that if I didn't move my car so that she could leave, that she'd call the cops. And she hit me and hit me and hit me, and ultimately she broke my thumb here. I had to have this casted because I was trying to protect myself. And I moved my car out of the way, and she left. And I was perplexed, didn't really know what to do. I kind of, sat down in the house and scratched my head and didn't know what resources, who to call, what to do. And the next thing I knew, the police showed up and charged me with domestic violence with assault against her. And I was taken to jail. And my family. No contact order for 365 days. So I couldn't contact her directly.
From just the allegation, this hasn't gone to court, or, there's been no, so just from the allegation, no, you're not allowed to contact for 365 days, just like that.
Yeah. It was called, and I was released the next day, but no access to my house anymore. I went back with a police escort to gather my belongings, but I had to go rent a new condominium. There was no proof. There was nothing. There was no scarring on her. There was no bruising on her. There was no nothing. But the allegations were that I had physically assaulted her. And that's all the courts needed to hear. And
even with did you then disclose what had happened? I imagine, or your version of events, what was that taken into consideration? Your broken hand?
Not by the courts. It was taken into consideration by my lawyer. And I said, I'd like to, if I'm being charged with assault, I think she should also be charged with assault, because I have a broken hand. I didn't assault her at all. I didn't push her. But what I found out, because so I had to sign something called an 810 peace bond, which is the easiest path out of a domestic violence situation. And you have to go to a 10-week seminar that deals with, how to deal with aggression. And I was like, well, I don't feel good about going to this because I'm not an aggressive person. I haven't assaulted her. I haven't done anything. And you're asking me to admit to something for the court's purposes, because this is how the court deals with this paperwork. You're asking me to admit to something that I didn't do, and I won't do that. So I said I'd like to press countercharges if that's the case. And the lawyer said, no, you don't want to do that. That's going to muddy the situation. It won't help at all. It'll make things worse. And that was my lawyer that was advising me that. And I thought, okay, well, like this guy knows what's going on in the criminal law system, so he must know something that I don't. And I took his advice. And in retrospect, I wish I hadn't. Um, but there's that ship sailed, so to speak. I suppose I still could at this point. I just don't know that becoming adversarial or making an allegation at this point, because it's not in my nature to be confrontational like that. I don't know that I would still do it, and maybe that's a problem that I need to deal with.
So your partner makes the allegation, you're arrested by the police, and then you're not allowed to go back home and you're not allowed to contact your partner for a year. And what
Correct.
about your son? Are you allowed to see him during that year?
I was allowed to see him during that year on her schedule whenever she deemed it appropriate, and all communication needed to go through either one of my brothers or sisters or my mom or dad. So she could communicate with anybody, but I couldn't communicate directly with her. So, but
So there's,
by virtue
I
of
just
that,
want to clarify, and sorry, I don't know if this is the case in the UK or not, but this non-contact order is before you've admitted anything. It's just imposed on you.
immediately. When I
Immediately.
when I was arrested, like we lived in a townhouse that had access to the front and the back, and there was a police car at the back that would block my car from leaving, and a police car at the front where they took me out. And when the officer came in, he said, "You're being arrested for domestic violence. Take your clothes or take your jacket because you're not coming back here." And I wasn't at that point when I was released from jail the next morning. The That's when the non-contact order came in. So again, like once you're into that system, I don't think she thought that it was going to be like that. I don't think she thought. I think, I don't know this to be true, but my perception is that she thought the police would come over, give me a stern talking to, and then we'd go back to life as normal, and I wouldn't misbehave in her mind or whatever anymore, that she would use the police as a tool against me. And when the no contact order came into place, immediately I was and she was hooked by the court system. So now there's no chance of independent reconciliation.
Yeah. What if you both wanted to reconcile? Just say.
So she reached out to me directly several times, by phone and by text, and I was told that if I contacted her or spoke to her by I guess in person or electronically, that I would be in breach and I would be charged again and go back to jail. So that wasn't a risk I was willing to take. So when she called, I ignored her calls. When she texted, I didn't respond to her texts. And she threatened me at one point and said, if you don't respond to my texts, this relationship is over and you won't see your son anymore. And like all I wanted to do was find a way to reconcile. But as soon as we were hooked into the court system, it wasn't an option anymore. And further, if I had responded, then she could have been held in contempt because she was inciting me or incentivizing me to breach a court order, and then she could have been charged as well.
And is this because I take it, is this like only in Canada? I haven't heard this as a, and do all men who are accused or all people who are accused then have a non-contact order? Is it always put in place?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It sounds like it's specific to Canada. So
I don't know that to be true. I don't know one way or another, to be honest with you.
yeah. So then as soon as one allegation is made,
It's over.
right, okay.
You're hooked into the court system. So at that point, my option is $10,000 retainer for a criminal lawyer to deal with the allegations, and a $10,000 retainer for a family law lawyer to fight for access to my son. And communication can happen between the family law lawyer and her family law lawyer. But again, I'm the respondent and she's the applicant. So, and she's also the complainant and I am the defendant. So in both cases, I'm defending against allegations which are untrue. And she has the upper hand because she's the person who made the allegations and is the applicant in the family law scenario.
Right. And just if we can go back, there was obviously that incident where she was physically violent and then accused you.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back across your relationship, would you say that was the only incident then, like, of domestic violence or other forms of, abuse in the relationship?
I think certainly not. It's the only physical violence, yes. Like there was, pushing and yeah, there was never any hitting. There was never any physical altercations between us. There was pushing when she didn't get her way or like pushed me out of the way or something like that.
Like often or rarely?
I would say kind of 3 or 4 times over the years that we were together, and certainly increasing in frequency towards the end. The amount of financial abuse, psychological abuse, social abuse, as soon as the allegation was made, she talked to our entire circle of friends about what the allegations were that she made, and I was socially isolated from everybody. So immediately I'm perceived as this perpetrator, and with effectively no recourse, other than the fact that I had a cast on my hand several days after the incident, and people started asking what happened. And I said to the hospital, like they asked, what happened to your hand? And I said, I caught a punch, like my ex hit me. And I would have thought that maybe that would trigger something in the criminal law system when an assault is reported to the hospital and you need to be casted. That would have triggered something, but it didn't. And maybe that's just an administrative issue.
And this is actually something that's come up before, it's not the same, but similar. Someone was mentioning, they weren't asked if they were ever hit or punched or, by their GP or by whoever whoever they were seeing.
Mhm.
And I wonder, do you think there's a reticence then to talk about these things or to kind of make them really clear, like as a man? Is there like that you don't want? Is there something about not? I don't know, because I suppose from my perspective, or not, I wonder, do you like?
No, well, I mean, not. I don't know. I can't speak for all of.
I know, sorry. Yeah.
Sure. But for me, it wasn't like so my GP our family doctor that we went to, that is also, my son's family doctor, asked how things were going. This is before Aubrey was even born, and asked, I guess, likely a canned set of questions. Has there ever been any abuse in your relationship? And I said, never physical, but there's often psychological abuse. And that was months in advance of Aubrey's birth. But I was just, so I guess I reported that to her, but at the same time, the masculine energy in me says, don't be a bitch, suck it up, like deal with it. This is just what you do as a man. So that's kind of 2 answers to your question, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you might almost maybe minimizing it a little bit or not saying, actually, this is really, this is really tough. I need help. Like, like that calling for help, like that. I don't hear that, that kind of like, actually, I really need help. And like, can someone do something, maybe that's a hard role to step into for,
Yeah, I think I can speak for certainly a lot of the guys that I deal with on a weekly basis. Like it took me 5 years to get to a point where I reached out for help with a men's peer support group. I'd seen psychologists, I'd seen, when we were dealing with like trying to keep the marriage together, we went to 4 different, a social worker, a psychologist, and a couple of marriage counselors. And my ex, as soon as the marriage counselor would ask her to take any level of responsibility for the conflict that was going on in our relationship, she would fire them. I don't like this person. We need to find somebody else. And we did that kind of lather, rinse, repeat 4 times until we finally got to a space where it was irreparable, and it didn't matter who else we saw. If they insinuated in any way, shape, or form that she was responsible or partly responsible even for the conflict, then she would just shut down and leave. I think she was hoping that the marriage counselor would just align with her. But she tried to turn my family against me as well. She would call my mom and call my sister and just say, will you talk some sense into your brother? And both of them were just like, this is your relationship with him. Like, you need to deal with this. Like, don't drag us into it. So.
And this is before, obviously, yes, before the incident at the end. So you said you felt there was psychological abuse, and you'd said that to your GP. So can I ask what that was?
So I'm quite handy around the house. And I'll fix things, and I built, a new laundry room in our new place, and we got a new washer dryer, and I built a framing and like folding table around the washer dryer, and then built the sink into it, and we needed some work done with regrouting for one of the showers in the guest room, and I would work, and then I would do that stuff when I got home, and it was a priority for her to. I guess to have that grouting done. And she would say things like, why don't you just fucking be a man and do what you're supposed to do? And like, I don't know, I don't really know if, be a man is maybe it's a gender characterization, but it made me feel like I wasn't a man if I didn't do that kind of thing. We leased a very nice vehicle together, BMW X6, like a very nice SUV. And then she decided about a year into our lease that she didn't want to do that. She wanted her own car. So I got her a Mercedes. And she stopped paying for the lease. And when she went on maternity leave, I was paying for not only the entire lease for my BMW, but also the entire lease for her Mercedes. And then when we split, I still continued to financially support her because she wasn't working. She was still on maternity leave. And I was also, paying for the mortgage and hydro and all that kind of stuff. And after we'd split, I was just putting money into our joint account, $3,500 a month, to make sure that there was enough in there to cover everything. I was paying for her car directly, so that wasn't part of that $3,500 a month. But like the $3,500 was to deal with the mortgage and hydro and gas and water and insurance and any of the other associated expenses with the home. And I started to get emails from our mortgage company saying that the mortgage payments were bouncing, and there was no way that there was not enough money in that account to carry the mortgage payments, which were like $600 or $700 bi-weekly. There was tons of cash, and I was continually putting in cash into that account. And so I started to, I never really looked at our joint account. I didn't monitor it really until such time as we started bouncing mortgage checks. And I found out that she was going to the liquor store and, buying large amounts of booze and, going and getting her hair done and, prioritizing manicures over mortgage payments. And it, like, that kind of financial abuse is very disheartening when you're doing everything you can to try and hold the family together. And
is this after you've split?
Yeah.
After you, yeah. So you're
So
still trying to maintain a kind of place for your son and your partner that's a secure place.
Yeah, for sure. And
still trying to be a provider then.
That's exactly it. And it seems like a lot of the work that I've done with kind of shared parenting legislation or legislative change in Canada is, essentially creating the rebuttable presumption of shared parenting in the case of separation or divorce. Because in my mind, the best kind of child support for a child is time with your parents. Like, I'll support, if we have the presumption of 50-50 custody, then I'll pay for everything for all the time, 50% of the time that I'm with them. But, continuing to incentivize or continuing to pay into child support when you don't see your child as a man is challenging, but it's challenging emotionally. Of course, I want to provide for my son. Based on the history, I'm worried that the child support payments are not going to my son, that they're going to mani-pedis and hair color and extensions and clothing and booze and whatever else. But if you look at the custody awards, or the number of times that women get custody in Canada specifically, it's between 75 and 85% of the time that women are awarded primary custody. And if you kind of zoom out a little bit, you realize that if things are not going per her wishes, there is an incentive to get out of the relationship. There's a financial incentive to get out of the relationship because you're going to get, alimony or spousal support, it's called here, and you're going to get child support, and you're not going to have to deal with this person who is disagreeable in your life. And yeah, so that's where I think it becomes a bit of an existential threat, is do you take this, education and put it into secondary and post-secondary or even primary on some level, to make people aware, or make young men and women aware that this is a potential downfall. The side effect of such an effort might be that people pair less, or people connect less and have even less children, which then creates an existential threat.
So it's almost like you're saying the system is set up to make it easy, basically, to split up and still have things kind of continue financially in the same vein. It seems like it's harder for men to get custody or to get enough, is that, what's happening in terms of custody for you and your son at the moment?
So she continues to make allegations of assault. So about 2 years ago, we went for an access exchange. I drove down to pick him up, and she made an allegation that I assaulted her in front of my son and my mother, who was there as a witness. And she went to her lawyers and said, "I don't feel safe." There was zero assault. There was zero touching. There was zero anything. This was actually in the early parts of the COVID pandemic. My mother is 70. She was 71 at the time, and she was high risk for COVID. And my son was, it's kind of weird to zoom back to this, but my son was living 60% of the time or 70% of the time with my ex. And my ex was inviting friends and family from out of region, from, you know, what they, at the time, they were calling hot zones for COVID. Like Ottawa was a big hot zone for COVID for a while. And she had friends from Ottawa in to stay at her house unmasked, which exposed my son to COVID, which exposed then my mom to COVID when my son came up to spend time with me. So I did what I thought was best. I got some N95 masks and made sure that Aubrey always had N95 masks, and she refused to have Aubrey wear a mask when there was guests in her house. And then she refused to put a mask on him when he came out for the access exchange. And so my mom was wearing a mask and I was wearing a mask, and I put Aubrey into the car and buckled him in. And actually, no, before that, he came out. And it's hard to say, this is purely speculative, but she had issues with motion sickness when being a passenger in the car. She believes that he has also issues with motion sickness, although they happen very intermittently. But they frequently happened when, I don't say frequently, maybe 50% of the time, he would get motion sick when shortly after I picked him up or on the way between our two houses. And there were several times that he got sick before he even left the house, before he even left her house. And I wondered how she was kind of psychologically conditioning him before he even left the house. Because as soon as he vomited or threw up, like, he's the most amazing puke and rally individual. Like, he'll throw up and then he's just like, I'm good, Dad, let's go. And like, then we're having a great time and we're, you know, counting Canadian flags on the way up, and like, we played all these driving games. But he would just get so, I think, wound up before he left. Anyway, so that was a little sidebar, but so he threw up on her front lawn before I picked him up. And my mom is in the car and she's masked and her windows are up because she knows that my ex has had people in her house. I asked for a mask for Aubrey. She refuses to give him a mask. So we have a backup mask in the car. He pukes in the lawn. I get him into the car. She comes storming out of the house and demands to see Aubrey after he's buckled into the car and he's now in my care. And she wants to get into the car, into the back seat, with my mom in the front seat. She's unmasked and refuses to wear a mask. And I just closed the door. I didn't like close it, seal it, but I closed the door so that she wouldn't be able to get into the car and, you know, dive her face into the car and expose my mom to even more. And she alleged that I assaulted her and was abusive to her, and I wouldn't let her have contact with my son, which I suppose is true. At that point, he was in my care. But that was another allegation of assault. And so as a result, I got a letter from her lawyers saying that, actually, I sent a letter to her lawyers asking if we could have a psychological assessment done, because I was very worried that she wasn't on her medication for her pituitary adenoma, and that may have been leading to somewhat irrational behavior. Her lawyers told me in no uncertain terms that she was a fit parent and there was nothing that should be questioned about her medical situation. And then, so they turned around and filed, I guess, a counter motion that said we would both go for a psychological assessment and my son would go for a psychological assessment, which I thought was, I didn't think that was appropriate. I was trying to keep him protected from, you know, any of the challenges that we were having as his parents. And initially they agreed to pay half, and then they withdrew that opportunity, or that offer to pay half, and they deemed that I needed to pay the whole thing. And it was $25,000 to have something called a Section 30 assessment done on the entire family. So they're effectively holding him ransom for $25,000 because I won't subject him to a psychological assessment. The look on your face says it all.
Really quite hard to get your head around. It just seems so like bizarre almost.
Mm-hmm. And you like there are times, and I'm sure if you speak to any of the other guys from Canada who are going through this, like you feel like you're Alice in Wonderland, where logic doesn't exist any longer, or there's a new kind of logic, and you're to use kind of, I guess, somewhat of a crude sports analogy, like you're playing football on a baseball diamond, but the bases move, and you can't. There's supposed to be a referee, but there's an umpire instead, and he calls things as he sees them, and they don't relate to the rules, and the guidelines or the sidelines move on the field, and the penalty kick area moves on the field, and some people are playing with bats and some people are playing with cleats, and like you're just like, what the hell's going on here? Doesn't, like, none of this makes any sense. And they also speak a different language. Like there's the Oxford English Dictionary, and then there's Brown's Law Dictionary. It's a different set of languaging altogether.
And so can you not see your son until this is done, or what's the story with the...
So I see him via FaceTime on my phone. I see him, it was supposed to be twice a week, and then she decided that it wasn't going to be twice a week anymore. It was going to be once a week. So I see him on Saturday mornings. And my objective is just to try and make those meetings the most positive part of his week, so that he has, a great time. And we sorry, a little segue.
That's okay.
So I do a lot of design work for my business using a program called Canva. Are you familiar with Canva?
Never heard of it.
It's kind of like Photoshop for complete idiots. And I'm not good with that kind of stuff, but I wrote a book. This one's called The Smart Little Llama, and published it on Canva. You can actually get it on Amazon now. But this is about parental alienation, and about the fact, like, it's written in 5-line poetry. And essentially it's looking at it's looking at separation or divorce from a positive perspective from a kid's point of view. So like one day, Daddy and Mama had a surprise for Smart Little Llama: a new house for Daddy, a new house for Mama, 2 playrooms for Smart Little Llama, and like 2 new sets of friends, and like just looking at it from a positive perspective from a kid's point of view. So that was the first one that I did. But then after I got this one published, I thought it would be really cool if Aubrey and I got to start writing books together too. So like this is the second book. He's into zombies and stuff like that. But we pick the background, and then he picks all the imaging, and then like he just tells me what to write, and I write it on the pages, and he writes these entire stories. So he loves the fact that it says, written by Aubrey McMillan, and on the back it says written by Aubrey McMillan and produced by my dad. And there's the covers for the next 2 books that we're actually working on the last book now. So we published 3, and he takes them into class and he reads them to his friends at school. And like, it's nice. And like when I was in grade 4, I wrote this, I don't know if you've ever heard of or read Choose Your Own Destiny or Choose Your Own Adventure books when you were younger. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I wrote this in grade 4. This is actually like a handwritten or typed version called The Labyrinth of Doom, and it's all like you can choose your own destiny. And he really liked this book when I was telling him about it. So we were reading this on one of our calls, and he really, really liked the book. He liked the fact that he could choose his adventure. So the first 3 books are his stories, and the last book that we're working on now is a Choose Your Own Adventure that finishes that 4-book series. But I wrote this in grade 4, and he's in grade 2. And I think it became a challenge for him. He was just like, well, I can do this in grade 2. And it took daddy until grade 4 to do this. So he feels about the fact that he can write his own books, and they look way better than what I did 4 years ago. So, yeah, that's kind of, I guess until such time as I deal with, I get the courts to resolve this Section 30 assessment issue. This is kind of where we're at.
Okay. And just to kind of go back to a few of the things that you said before, you said your partner kind of told all your friends after she'd made the initial allegation about what happened, or not about what had happened, about her about what she thought. Yeah. So what happened after that? Did you then talk to your friends? Did you explain to them, what had actually gone on? Are you still seeing your friends? Those friends, are they part of your life anymore?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. I think we started with, this, military trauma is congruent with masculinity, and intimate partner violence and sexual abuse is not congruent with masculinity. And I think that's an institutional bias, or maybe like an not environmental bias, but like it's a human bias. As soon as there's an allegation made, it's, even your close circle of friends, when they hear an allegation like that, it's easy for people to believe it, especially when they're busy and they don't have the wherewithal to do an investigation. So like, I had a very close circle of friends that have been with me the entire time, but any of our mutual friends certainly sided with her, just because, I think, rightly or wrongly, women are sympathetic characters and men are not sympathetic characters.
And is this even after, did you then try to put your side of the story across, or was it more like there's no point, or what was your
there comes a point in time where you have to prioritize, or at least where I found I had to prioritize the value of continued conflict. And like, I don't, you certainly know more about this than I do, but I've done a fair amount of, research into cluster B personality types. And I think she has certainly many narcissistic traits. I don't know if she would qualify as like a hardcore narcissist, but many narcissistic traits. And one of the things that is, as far as my research has indicated, the best way to deal with a narcissist is to completely ignore them and to stop giving them supply. So for me to go in, or to go to, our mutual friends and say, she's full of shit, she's a liar, here's all the proof, and then they go back to her, and then that just feeds her supply line, and all of a sudden we're back into this massive adversarial situation, which I don't think is the right thing for my son. She's recoupled, I've recoupled. I have a wonderfully supportive partner that I'm eternally grateful for. She's just amazing. And I think, she took every opportunity to kind of rub in my face, not my partner now, my ex, took every opportunity to rub in my face the fact that she was kind of moving on with our son without me. She would tell me that, he'd taken his first steps before he ever took his first steps. She would tell me she coupled with somebody and told my son, that he had a new sister. And which would have been fine if it was a long-term relationship. But I think that guy was smarter than I was and got out of the relationship at 11 months before he was financially responsible for her, and took his daughter with her, or with him. So now he doesn't have this guy who is supposed to be his new stepdad, and he doesn't have his sister, and this is confusing for him. And then she recoupled again with another guy who was a chef, and you know, the same kind of thing repeats. She's trying to create this white picket fence situation for our son, and he left as well, and now she's recoupled for a third time, and my son is calling this guy dad. And I think for a lot of people that would be very challenging. I think she's doing that because she thinks it's going to hurt me. I am very grateful for the fact that Aubrey has a positive male role model in his life on a daily basis. This guy's a fireman. From all I can see, he's a good guy, and I'm glad that my son has him in his life. I'm not jealous of it. I'm no more than I would be jealous of, a positive male role model as a teacher that's with him with my son 8 hours a day. But I think she thinks I'm going to be jealous about that. And I guess the segue to that is my mother and father split up when I was 4 years old. Both of them recoupled, and my stepdad became my dad. I call him dad. So I don't have any resentment towards that. But as an interesting kind of, maybe not interesting, but as a caveat to that, my father, who had very little contact with me, he was a weekend dad, did his best. But he committed suicide when I was 26 years old, after recoupling and going through, another relationship. And I think the psychological toll on him from losing his first relationship and, potentially toiling through his second relationship, was more than he could bear.
That's a really difficult thing for you to have experienced, even, as an adult. Did your seeing your dad at the weekend, did that create distance, I suppose, in that relationship?
I didn't realize it at the time, but I think it did. I think it had a heavier toll on him than it had on me. For me, it was just, and I see this for Aubrey as well, my son. It's just the way life is. The toll on my father and the toll on me is far greater than the toll on him, and that's the way we would design it to be. It's done intentionally that way. I don't want, I'm not going to spend $25,000 that should be going to Aubrey on putting Aubrey and her and I through some psychological testing because she deems that it's not safe. But by virtue of the fact that all you have to do is make an allegation like that, and you can railroad the entire family finance situation. I don't know about what the situation is in the UK, but most Canadian families are kind of within a couple $1,000s of bankruptcy. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So if you immediately have an unexpected $20 or $30 or $40,000 expense, that can derail you pretty quickly. And I'm into both family law and criminal law lawyers for more than $250,000 with no end in sight.
And some people have spoken about experts in parental alienation and kind of using them as expert witnesses and things like that. Is that something that you've done? Or
So I think you may or may not have met Kelsey Green, who is my partner with Complex Trauma Canada. So he's going to IFC Malta, University of Malta, to take his master's in parental alienation so that he can be an expert as deemed by the courts in parental alienation. And there are two others who have that designation in Canada. One of them is a lawyer named Brian Ludmer, and one is a psychologist that Kelsey's working with right now. There are some lawyers who are kind of moving with the shared parenting initiative to try and make legislative change. And sometimes I wonder if it's just lip service, because if they become the lawyers who are the only ones who are rallying for legislative change, then lots of families gravitate to those lawyers and they increase their billable hours. I don't mean to come across as jaded and just experienced in the family law system. When I spoke to Brian Ludmer about it and I asked if I could retain him for my case, and my financial assets are totally depleted. I have nothing left to fight, so I'm self-represented. And he said, I'm happy to give you kind of a 15 or 20 minute chat and let you know what best route to take to self-represent yourself, but I can't take you on as a client unless you can pay for it.
So there's this system of kind of almost an extra layer of financial violence or abuse in the court system itself and through. I'm not saying this guy specifically, I just mean in general, that financially just so much, losing so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the accumulations of a lifetime. And not just that, but like when I was pulled out of my house and I had to go rent a condo, and a 2-bedroom condo, which is not cheap in downtown Toronto. But I had to have a bedroom for my son for when he came over, and so I did that, and I'm still carrying the bills for the house, and I can't go back to the house. Like I went back to grab a bag of clothes that I could take and continue to work from. But then she divided the assets as she saw fit. She threw out and lots of my clothes, like not stuff that like I went to Texas for a friend's wedding before I met her, and I bought this Stetson hat, and it's a stupid cowboy hat. It's like it's something that I would wear like out for Halloween, and we actually did this event. It was a country music event every year, and I would wear it for that. And like, it was a $400 Stetson hat. Like it was a really nice cowboy hat. My golf clubs. Like she threw them all out. Like there's no reason to do that unless you're trying to be vindictive. Originally, she said, you can have the barbecue, and I said, well, thank you, I think, but it's actually an asset of my company. It's not mine or yours. And then she said, no, I'm actually keeping the barbecue. And her lawyer said, no, she said she bought the barbecue and we're listing it as one of her assets. And she just did that because, like, I love to barbecue. She just wanted to take that piece away from me. There's no financial. She still owes me more than $100,000, but and the courts ignore it.
So you leave, you get a bag of your stuff, everything else that you own is still in the house, and then how is that divide? You're saying that how shouldn't you have some ability?
Yeah, no, there's no contact order. So she decides, so we ultimately have to sell the house because she's bouncing mortgage checks, getting her nails done and buying booze. So we sell the house, but we're still in a non-contact order, so I can't see her or go to the house. So she takes whatever she wants, throws out whatever she wants, and leaves the remnants in the garage for me to come pick up after she's moved out.
Wow. Sounds like a really bad, like, like a not very effective way of doing things.
Just like, you have to, like I just mentioned, like you feel like you're Alice in Wonderland. Like you just scratch your head and go like, how is this possible? How can like our legal system be built like this?
And so when the police came the first time, did you tell them what happened to you? Like when they were taking you away and putting you in jail?
Yep.
And what was the response to that?
You should keep your mouth shut and contact a lawyer.
And the lawyer said,
Keep your mouth shut. Don't talk to the police. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court.
so even though you were physically abused and you're physically assaulted and your hand was broken,
Mm-hmm.
you were told, I wonder, I suppose I'm wondering if roles had been reversed. If you'd made the allegation and it was a female partner with a broken hand saying, well, actually, he assaulted me, is that what the response would have been?
I highly doubt it. I think you don't doubt it either. Just pulling up these photos on my phone. I don't know if you can see that. That's the X-ray.
Yeah.
That's me with my son back in the house after she'd left.
Oh, he's cute. He looks about the same age as my son there.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Like he would have been, that was December 15th. So that would have been 2 weeks after the incident happened with my ex. So he would have been 9 months old at that point.
Right.
Yeah. So
Really cute.
thank you. Yeah, so I guess where does that leave us? What else can I tell you, or what else would you like to know, or how else can I?
I think I know that how are you doing for time in terms of,
I'm okay. I'm okay for probably another 30 minutes.
okay. I don't want to keep you for another 30 minutes, but maybe I could just ask a few more pieces about the work that you do, with the Canadian Centre for Men and Families.
Mm-hmm.
So is it support groups that you're running?
Yes.
What are the main things that you kind of come across then?
When I first started attending the support groups, when I first kind of reached out to the Canadian Centre for Men and Families 5 years after this had all happened, the biggest kind of release of anxiety for me was getting onto a Zoom call with a bunch of guys who had gone through exactly the same thing, because I felt totally isolated. And when I got onto the first Zoom call and everybody had the same story, one guy said, it seems like we all married the same girl. And there was just this tremendous sense of relief. I was just like, I think I've found like my tribe of people who are willing to talk about it. So it's a safe space where, you know, guys can get off their chest what's going on. Like, you know, one of the guys on the call last night said, you know, I'm hesitant to say this, you know, it's something I want to talk about, but I don't know if I can talk about it here. And he said, I had thoughts of suicide this week. And I said, you know, it is absolutely a safe space to talk about it. And I'm glad you brought it up. And it's something that a lot of us have gone through. and it's something that you will come out the other side of. It's okay. It's those thoughts are typical, but like what I hear is uh, a lot of cases of false allegations, a lot of cases of institutional abuse by the court systems or by the jails, um, a lot of flagrant parental alienation for the purposes of either um, hurting the father or just maintaining control over a situation after things have gone downhill. Some guys come on and they're quiet. They just want to listen. Some guys contribute. So I guess about 6 months into my attendance in these support groups, one of the executive directors for actually the national intake for the Canadian Center for Men and Families reached out to me and said, would you be interested in becoming a facilitator for the men's peer support groups? And I said yes. And then I guess another one of the executive directors, so it's kind of, currently it exists in silos. Canada's a fairly large geographic country, so there's a couple of offices in Ontario, there's one in Alberta, there's one in British Columbia, there's one in Halifax, and each one of them tends to operate in these little vertical silos of they just support the people in their area. But what that means is, for the Ottawa group, they have meetings on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And if men are in a crisis situation on a Monday because they just came from court and they want to be able to talk to people, there's no resources for them. So my recent kind of task with the Canadian Center for Men and Families is to kind of amalgamate the entire kind of national structure of support meetings. And what we found was that there was a groundswell of support groups on Wednesday night that happened at exactly the same time. So the BC office or the Vancouver office was running one, and the Calgary or the Alberta office was running one. The Ottawa office, the York office were all running support groups at the same time, but there was nothing on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So we're trying to spread out the allocation so that we have 7 days of service for people. Sometimes long weekends are tough on guys because they don't get to see their kids on the long weekends, and they want that meeting on the weekend. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now with CCMF National is pulling together a national schedule so that we can offer 7-day-a-week services for guys, and B, standardizing the delivery of those services, because the support group, the men's peer support group meetings, when I first got into them, was a lot of venting, just guys getting shit off their chests that they needed to get off their chest, but with no kind of forward movement, no getting better, no healing, no nothing. So when I started hosting my own, not my own, but I started hosting on behalf of CCMF and facilitating one of the nights of the week, and I now do 2 nights a week. I started to put a challenge in at the end of the workshop, self-care challenge. So some weeks it's hydration, like just drink an extra liter of water. Like as soon as you get up in the morning, drink a liter of water to start your day, and then drink another liter of water for the rest of your day. Another challenge was one of our group members actually did this book called, he hasn't published it, but we're working on it together. It's called Batshit Crazy, but not BATSHIT. It's BATCHIT, Batch It Crazy. So it's nutrition, which a lot of guys can kind of relate to. A lot of the guys will order takeout 5 nights a week. So we put this challenge together where, you go out and buy these groceries and you prepare nutritious meals for a week all on one day so that you don't have to think about it for the next 7 days or next 14 days. And then the one that I issued to the group yesterday is actually one that I'm going to do this weekend. It's a dopamine detox. and it's just shutting down all of your electronic devices for 48 hours and unplugging from the matrix, so to speak, and just, getting into, a good book. I've got a couple of books. I'm halfway through The Respondent, and I've just got this. My girlfriend just got me this book by Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but so that was the challenge for this week. We do goal setting workshops with guys to give them some sense of forward progress, community building. I'm trying to think. The other one that we did was kind of a sleep cycle challenge, just like get everyone on the same kind of, or on whatever time zone they're in, because they come from all over the country. Like some of the guys on the call last night were from Vancouver, and some of them were from Ontario, and some of them were from Montreal, Quebec, and some from Halifax. So just to get your circadian rhythm back in sync, making sure that you're getting enough vitamins and enough nutrition, enough hydration, enough sleep, and the kind of pillars of self-care. So the groups have been fairly receptive to it, and then since I've started mentoring other facilitators, and they've taken on some of these things. The other thing we do is we have something called a victory lap, where we just ask the guys to reflect on something positive that happened this week or something they feel proud of this week, so that when we leave the meeting, it's not just like, bitch, vent, complain. There's actually something to bring it back up. And the other thing that I find the challenges do is it incentivizes the guys to come back the next week to report on their progress, which means that it's not just, a drop in 1 week and we don't see you for 3 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever it is. They're actually coming back and saying, hey, that hydration thing really worked. It was really helpful for me. I really appreciate it. What are we gonna do this week? And we'll still have the venting component to it, because I think, that's critically important. And with no disrespect to you as a psychologist, I think the peer support environment is as important as a one-on-one therapeutic environment, just because you feel like you've got similar lived experiences with everybody.
Absolutely. And you said in the beginning that it was really refreshing or something along those lines because you'd felt so isolated. Can you tell me a bit more about that sense of isolation and how that had arisen and what it had felt like, I suppose?
I think guys typically internalize their struggles. I watched a thing on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and it said, when things are at their worst, who do you talk to? And there's just this montage of guys saying, nobody. Like, there's no one that I talk to. I don't ever talk to anybody. Like, I deal with it. I just do what I do. And I did that. Like, I related to that Instagram post because I did that for 5 years. Like, I didn't talk to anybody about my problems. I didn't. And maybe it's a self-inflicted isolation. I don't know. Yeah, I'm probably guilty of it as much as any other guy is. Just like you don't feel entitled to, or you don't give yourself permission to reach out for help. And for some guys, they never get there, and for some guys, it's too late when they ultimately take their lives or get to a point of despair where it's less painful to be dead than to be alive. I remember hearing where one of the things that we're working on with CCMF is going through kind of something called ASSIST, which is suicide prevention training in Canada, or how to deal with somebody who's going through suicidal ideation. And I remember hearing...
Sorry. Okay, sorry, on you go.
No, it's okay.
I was just going to ask about, you said you weren't speaking to anyone, and lots of guys don't speak to anyone. Are you acknowledging, like, it's in your head, are you going, I've got this problem, I need to sort it out or get help, or is it like, I'm not even going to think about it, I'm just going to put that away and kind of not like acknowledge it, and even to myself, is it, I suppose I'm saying, is it acknowledged internally, yes, I have a problem, but I'm not going to ask for help? Or is it like, I'm not, I'm just not even going to kind of look at it myself? Like, I'll just try and think about something else. Or does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think the answer to that question is like there's an acknowledgement that there is a problem. There was for me, that I was isolated. I just didn't know how to fix it. So because I didn't have a path out of that problem, I compartmentalized it and put it over here and said, okay, well, I can't deal with that right now. There is no viable solution for this right now. So let's plow forward with something that's more productive so that I can be a provider for my family. But just to kind of, I guess, come back to and finish the thought about like the assist suicide training. One of the things that that we're taught is, you don't say to somebody who's having suicidal thoughts like, don't do anything stupid, because like it's not stupid to them. Like suicide isn't stupid to them at that point in time. It's actually smart to them. Like ending their life. And I've voicemails from guys who have just said, thank you very much. Like you literally saved my life, and that makes me feel good. That I've helped them through something. This one guy said, he's dealing with false allegations and he's in criminal court and family court at the same time. And he said, if I lose my kids, I'm going to opt for medically assisted suicide. And I was like, no, you're not. No, we're gonna work through this, and we're gonna figure out a way forward. And like he has a tremendous amount of evidence that is in his favor, and he's done amazing work. He's a PhD research scientist who's gone through this Alice in Wonderland experience. And there's constant I feel I need to constantly reinforce that he has all this positive evidence in his case that supports his position. And he looks at the way the courts operate, and he says it doesn't seem to matter how much evidence I have. It still seems hopeless. So getting him to a space where he's willing to keep fighting and keep moving forward. And I suppose I have a unique perspective because my dad did commit suicide, and I can speak to a child's perspective of having lost a parent to suicide. And I just say to him, like, if you commit suicide, then your ex, the one who made the allegations, wins. That's what she wants. She wants you dead. She wants you completely out of her life. And that's the worst thing that you can do for your daughters. And, more importantly, I know you're a competitive asshole and you don't want to let her win. So it's like, all right, let's do this.
And so there's that fighting spirit. And it seems like that's kind of the thing, like men are willing to like fight on until maybe it just feels like they can't win, but they're not as willing to kind of ask for help or say, actually, I'm feeling weak and vulnerable.
Yeah, I think once you've kind of created a connection with somebody, I think it's easier. I think many men, like I won't use his name, but one of the guys that I was talking about, first time we actually jumped on a call one-on-one, we ended up talking for an hour and a half, and he's just like, I feel great about this, and I hope it's okay with you, but like I want to call you my friend. It's making me tear up about it now, but like that's that connection,
Yeah. And it's really, it's really lovely to talk to you, Gavin, and really refreshing, because a lot of the men that I've spoken to have, like you, really struggled, but are still maybe in a place of despair. And I think what you've done is just incredible, like the work that you're doing with the men and, and with your son, making that time so special. And I can see that, even though you've been through a lot, you're taking a lot of positives from it.
Thanks. I think I had a thought and I just totally lost it. It's really, I think it's an awareness thing, and that's why I was excited to have this discussion with you. I think more people need to be aware of it. There was an initiative for. I just got to actually think about a podcast about it yesterday. It was in Kent, in England, and I think it's now gone national. But it was to prevent. I guess the goal of it was to decrease parental alienation and to decrease the suicide rates in men who were alienated from their kids, because I think the stat was 27% of alienated fathers had, I don't know if it was had attempted or had, I think it was had committed 40, over 40% had attempted suicide. I can send it to you if you wish. But I think there's a big issue here that needs to be addressed. And I guess I remember what I was going to say. Men will fight. And I think that's why the challenges work so well at the end of those support group sessions, because it's like, all right, this is a fight I can win. I can do this nutrition or hydration or sleep thing, and I can feel like I've accomplished something. That's it. You have a son now?
Sorry?
You have a son or a daughter?
I have a son. Yeah, son. Yeah.
And how old is he?
So he's just over a year. His name's Isaac.
Your face just lit up completely. I ask you about that. Good for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's not interesting, but I think everything I'm hearing, I'm a newish parent, and it's been put a very different perspective on everything I'm hearing from, the men I've been speaking to, what it would be like to not see your child, or, that's, yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. So,
Anyways,
thank
you
you
very much for doing the study, and I'll do my best to kind of spread the word once you've got your new intake form.
Brilliant. Okay.
Thanks, Marianne.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.